In 1915, a 23-year-old chemist found a way to turn a useless oil into the first treatment that actually worked against one of the most feared diseases on Earth. Patients who were being sent away to die started walking out of quarantine. 1 year later, she was dead, and the man in charge renamed her discovery after himself. For the next 80 years, the cure had a name, just not hers. To understand what she actually achieved, you have to understand the nightmare she was trying to stop. By the early 1900s, leprosy, now called Hansen's disease, was considered a death sentence. In Hawaii, if you were diagnosed, you were not treated. You were removed. The territorial government enforced mandatory quarantine. Children were legally stripped from their families and shipped to an isolated peninsula called Kalaupapa. Surrounded by ocean cliffs on 3 sides, impassable mountains on the 4th, they called it a leper colony. The patients called it exile. And then I noticed something. The medicine actually already existed. Chaulmoogra oil from Southeast Asia was known to affect the disease. But doctors couldn't make it work. They forced patients to swallow the oil. It made them violently sick. They injected it under the skin. It left painful abscesses that lasted for months. The treatment was so bad, some patients refused it, even if it meant exile. They had the cure, but they couldn't use it. And this is where the rules changed. A local physician approached a young researcher named Alice Ball. She was 23. She was working alone in a university lab. And within 1 year, she solved the one problem that had stopped medicine for decades. Her breakthrough was elegant in its simplicity. She developed a method to isolate the active compounds in the oil, making them water-soluble. For the first time, the medicine could enter the bloodstream directly, without destroying the body. The patients began to respond. People who had been told they would die in isolation were suddenly being discharged. They were going home. And that single change turned a death sentence into a survivable condition. But the version you'll find in official records doesn't mention her at all. Let me tell you what that meant on the ground. In the records of Kalihi Hospital, there is a 19-year-old Hawaiian man. He was taken from his family and transported to Honolulu under the quarantine laws. He spent 2 years receiving the standard treatment. The raw oil made him vomit. The lesions got worse. The board was preparing his transfer papers to the exile colony. He would never see his family again. And then, he was enrolled in the first trial of Alice Ball's injectable solution. Within months, the lesions receded. He walked out of that hospital. He went home. He lived into his 60s. Alice Ball never knew. She died on December 31st, 1916. She was 24. The official cause was tuberculosis. But some historians point to chlorine poisoning from a lab accident. And then something appears in the hospital records that shouldn't be there. Her death certificate was altered. The original cause of death was visibly overwritten. Different handwriting, different ink. That alteration has never been publicly explained. Whether it was deliberate or clerical, no one has ever answered for it on record. At first, it looked like a normal academic handover. Arthur Dean, the president of the College of Hawaii, took over her lab. And then, her name disappeared. Dean didn't publish a tribute. He didn't mention her work. He published the method under his own name. He called it the Dean method. I found this while looking into what happened to Ignaz Semmelweis, a doctor destroyed for being right. I noticed a pattern. The system takes what you build and then forgets you ever existed. What happened to Seneca Village was geographic erasure. What happened here is something quieter. Intellectual erasure. When I investigated the Radium Girls, I found the exact same arithmetic. Use the person, take the product. Erase the contribution. But what makes this story dangerous is that no one had to orchestrate a massive conspiracy to steal anything. By the time anyone corrected the record, she had already been gone for years. It wasn't until 1922 that a colleague publicly published a paper insisting the treatment belonged to Alice, calling it the Ball method. And even after the correction, nothing changed. If institutions cared about truth, that would have been the end of the story. They didn't. Dean never responded. The University of Hawaii said absolutely nothing. Her name didn't come back. Not for decades. The treatment saved thousands of lives. But for almost a century, the person who made it possible didn't exist. Not because she was forgotten, but because no one with power ever chose to remember her. Alice Ball died on December 31st, 1916. She was 24. That patient who walked out of the hospital lived to see his 60s. She never knew. Arthur Dean died with awards and recognition. Alice died without a headstone. For most of the 20th century, the closest thing she had to a monument was a line in an ignored paper, and a tree in the university courtyard that thousands of students walked past without knowing her name. The tree is still alive. Alice is too. But only if we keep saying her name out loud. So let's fix that. Her name was Alice Ball. Stealing credit for a cure is one kind of erasure. The next one doesn't touch your name at all. It just moves your town under 22 meters of water and calls it progress. 163 families in Italy found out. That is next.